It is Thursday, October 11th, 2018, and this is the MMA Beat. Welcome, everyone. Inside our New York City studios, we are live. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Luke Thomas. I'm from SiriusXM as well as MMA Fighting. Meet the rest of the panel from MMA Fighting. That is Danny Segura. Making her reappearance, I should say, because it's not the first time, from the In Fighting Shape podcast, as well as UFC Unfiltered, as well as Access TV. Phoenix Carnivale is here. And you know that, Jamoke on the end.
Jamoke.
I just like calling you that for no good reason at all.
Fans love it, too.
From The Ringer, as well as MMAfighting.com, that's Chuck Mindenhall. By the way, as we didn't do it last week because we were on the road, but we're back in our studio. So I've been asking for your questions using the hashtag #TheMMABeat. Keep sending them. We're going to pick the best of them, and we'll select them for our After the Beat program when our normally scheduled run is done. Okay? All right. Let's get to it now. We had planned, one of the things we're trying to do with this show a little bit, if I can pull back the curtain, ladies, or lady and gents, whatever, is I'm trying to make the show where we look ahead a little bit more, and we're going to do that. We're going to talk about Jon Jones and UFC 230. I kind of wanted to put, in Bellator, of course, as well, but I wanted to put the Khabib and Conor stuff a little bit later in the show because everyone has talked it to death. And then on the way up this morning, Khabib Nurmagomedov takes to Twitter, Twitter and Instagram, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but he put a message and he said, and it tags them in it, to the UFC. Why didn't you fire anyone when their team, talking about Conor's, attacked the bus and injured a couple of people? They could have killed someone there. Why no one says anything about insulting my homeland, religion, nation, and family? In any case, if you punish me, Zabara Tugugov has nothing to do with that. If you think that I'll keep silent, then you are mistaken. You canceled his fight, and you want to dismiss him just because he hit Conor. But don't forget that it was Conor who had hit my other brother first. Just check the video. He says, one more thing, you can keep my money, which is the $2 million purse. That, by the way, is the Athletic Commission that has that, not him, not them. That you are withholding. You are pretty busy with that. I hope it won't get stuck in your throat. We have defended our honor, and this is the most important thing. We intend to go to the end. Okay. Phoenix, welcome back.
Yeah.
You get dibs on this one.
Great.
What do you make of this outburst?
You know, everybody understands how he feels about the situation. Just because you understand why a person does something doesn't mean that they should do it. I mean, there's plenty of chicks at work I would have loved to take stuff out on, right? But so I'm not condoning his behavior. I am saying that I understand it. I also think that comparing the bus situation to something that's happening in fight night is a little bit different. I don't think that the penalties from the UFC with Conor's situation were high enough. I think that the UFC said, well, everyone else is going to find you, so you just deal with that and then just come back to us. So I do understand his point of view there. But I don't think that you're allowed in that octagon regardless of the situation, no matter who punches first. So that's the thing. I mean, we're forgetting rules and regulations because we're looking at, well, you didn't do it to this guy and you didn't do it to that guy. But in the end, all you can do is take care of yourself and be responsible for yourself. And that goes for like fighting or any situation, you know? The MMA fan in me is like, this is so funny and interesting. But the professional in me is like, oh man, this is bad on all sides. Everybody has to be held accountable. Everyone is at fault here. So yeah.
For me, it just kind of, that whole post spoke to who Khabib really is. I mean, we talked about like, how he is as a fighter, and this guy operates under a different code. I mean, he's telling the UFC, look, you can keep my money. I don't care. I'm going to stand for my brothers. Same thing when, he was getting insulted, about his religion, his country. And, if we remember, I think it was in the third round or second that Conor told them, look, it's just business. Mm-hmm. Audio came out.
Yeah, a bit late for that.
Yeah. Not for Khabib. And look, I don't know if this is real or not, but I don't think it's a bluff. I wouldn't think it's far-fetched if he's like, okay, I'm not fighting. If you're going to fire my brother, I'm not fighting. I think this is just who Khabib is, and he's just a different person that operates under a different set of rules.
If anything came of this whole situation, it's that we didn't know who Nurmagomedov is going in. We certainly know how principled and how deep all this runs through him now. Like, this is one of those situations, right? Because you see him throughout fight week, we weren't sure. We kept talking about, like you were mentioning off air, about his stoicism. 100%. We knew that about him, but we did not know to what extent he takes everything this seriously.
Yeah, it's cultural. I mean, if you think about it, in American culture, we joke about everything. It's actually kind of a good thing about us in some ways, right? Like, we joke about a lot of stuff, but For Russians, there's like a quote that basically says, the smiling man is a foolish man. You know, like that's how they think about it. They do take everything seriously. And then with Muslims, you can't write a cartoon, you can't do anything like that. They do not like God joked about. And I don't think they're wrong or right. I think it's a cultural difference. And I understand that. And I respect other people's cultures as well. I mean, sometimes there's things that you do take too far. And I think Conor does go a little too far sometimes.
Conor took things too far, although I don't know that being humorless is a virtue.
No. But
personally. But here's the way I looked at this. I thought, number one, this is bad, right? You don't want I mean, let's be real about this. Everyone, I said this on MMA Hour with you on Monday. It's like, oh, no one knows who Khabib is. Boy, they know now.
Yeah.
Number one. So number two, I think he's a big star. Number two, it's like, man, it feels like the UFC's coming apart at the seams a little bit here. Now, I don't want to exaggerate the problem, but I'm just saying how I feel at the moment, which is Conor began to pull on, and other guys too, but he began to pull on this thread, and now the whole piece of clothing is starting to show holes. Every other guy is getting emboldened to say something. We had him on the show earlier. Kareem Zidane made a point on Twitter today. I forgot about this. I had Khabib on my show in 2016, my radio show. And even then, do you guys remember this? He said if the UFC didn't give him a title shot, he would threaten to make sure they never had a show in Russia.
Oh, wow.
I forgot. I
do remember that now that you mentioned it.
I was like, thanks, Kareem. I had totally forgotten about that. So this is a bit of a pattern of behavior. But to me, Chuck, aren't you a little bit worried? Everyone's kind of cheerleading this a little bit. And you can't help but say, to the points you've raised, he's got a little bit of a leg to stand on. At the same time, this kind of butting heads between the UFC and their top stars, dude, it's bad for business, man.
Yeah.
Bad. Yeah.
Well, they keep playing it out in public, right? Like these are always notes through Instagram or something like that rather than just a phone call to the UFC. And obviously it's more effective. And I think that there is a broader point, obviously, to this. And you mentioned it right off the bat when we did our post-fight show, that you can't, when the UFC basically was hands off with the punishment for Conor McGregor for that whole Dolly incident, when they were basically like, well, there won't be any real repercussions. Here we are with our fight. This is going to be epic. He took matters into his own hands. I think he used the word blowback. I think that that's really the truth. I think that he looks at like he's the guy now who has to correct the situation. It's probably been seething in him this whole time. And I think he's still in that set of principles. That's where he's still at. Now, he doesn't seem like he'll come off his word very much, but at the same time, I think once he talks to the UFC and, Dana and everybody gets involved, I think that he will soften on this or they'll come to some other agreement. But right now, man, it's amazing. Even in that when he made the little, statement, everybody thinks he's coming in for questions and he just like kind of makes a statement and he goes right back to it, man. His heels are dug in pretty deep right now.
And for a while, it was like, the promotion was having issues with Conor McGregor in negotiations, right? And he was sort of out there. He was like, the guy really with the cards, right? Pulling the strings. But Khabib, it's safe to say he's probably at this point, giving this whole fight, he might be a top 3 pay-per-view draw, top 2 maybe. Conor McGregor's still on top.
Yeah. At worst, top 5.
Yeah, at worst, top 5. I was just looking at Instagram. Khabib has now 11 million followers on Instagram.
Yeah, it's 12. Yeah.
GSP
if he fights Ferguson,
GSP has 2. So
if he fights Ferguson, that's an enormous fight.
That's a huge fight. Yeah.
That's why I said this thing has matured into this. I know it's a whole different topic, but it's matured into this epic fight. It's crazy.
And also keeping in mind Nate Diaz. So when you're butting heads with the top pay-per-view draws, man, that's a dangerous game you're playing. And I'm sure something will get worked out. But still, the UFC is slowly but surely
How about
losing.
the different tactics? Conor McGregor, material man, cockscomb coming up, always a dandy, like we're selling everything sponsorship, and then
he said dandy.
and then he, here's the opposite side. It was like, you got my $2 million, keep it. I don't even care. What a totally stark difference there.
Phoenix, did they, in retrospect, did the UFC promote this fight correctly? And correctly is not a question of did they maximize sales. Early estimates are 2.4, 2.5. That's going to be the biggest in MMA history by a long shot. So pretty clearly in that sense they did. But boy, they have stoked the fires of something here that I don't know they know how to put out all that easily. Did they make a mistake or not?
I am actually going to say no.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. It's, as a person who loves storylines, it really was the story. It was the story. I don't want you to not tell me the truth. I don't want to not hear the story. So he did throw the hand truck, and I see it in the promos. That is a part of the story. That's not my problem. My problem is that you have an angry workplace. We've had this for a while, and now it's coming to light from everyone's point of view. There's so many point of views. It's not even 2 sides. There's like 20 sides right now about how people feel about this type of thing. I don't know how you promote fights. I mean, I came from traditional martial arts. I value the respect. All I need is 2 phenomenal athletes to watch it. But yeah, we love drama. I mean, think about all the movies that are sports movies. If they're good movies, they go for Academy Awards. We love this type of drama. I accept that. But I think that as a whole, we're kind of rewarding bad behavior as well. And I don't know if there's just a different way to tell a different story, but this is the true story right now.
It's funny because, by holding the first press conference in an empty room and by showing that footage, okay, those are 2 completely different things. But at the same time, they're kind of chirping to the same point, which is we can't bring these guys together because there might be chaos. If we bring the fans in, it might be chaos. So we're going to, they're trying to keep them. What is that ultimately saying in the subtext? It's like that these guys are, that they are going to cause that kind of trouble. And that's really the promise behind it all, right? Like you set it up by saying this, we're keeping them away because there's a promise of danger to this whole, to the whole thing. It was probably their only play. Conor just took it too far, I think. Honestly, when it really comes down to it, and you look at the way
Conor's been taking it.
He has been taking it too far, and maybe he took it a little. I don't want. You know what? He sells fights. It's stupid for me to sit here and say anything about it, but sometimes maybe he treats certain things as part of his material and frivolous, and he does go a little deep, and he does know he's jangling nerves, but to what extent maybe he doesn't. Maybe the repercussions aren't really there. Maybe you know what I'm saying? Like maybe he goes too far without realizing it.
Maybe we don't have one cash cow. Maybe we start taking energy away from him and start putting energy into other athletes and have them become more revenue streams.
Yeah, but then there's Nate Diaz, to your point, right? Yeah. He blew up, but he's also a malcontent. Yeah. And I love Nate Diaz. I really do. Sure. Could you call him a happy camper? You really couldn't,
I don't know. But this is a weird situation. And I think the UFC, I think the fight was promoted correctly. Because, look, the bus incident, given or not, it's still part of the story, right? But I think the UFC does bear a lot of responsibility in the sense of when things are said, when Conor takes it too far, because Conor's going to take it too far. But you do have to, as a promotion, you do have to come out and put out a statement or maybe a small fine, even though, just a slap on the wrist, something, just to set a precedent that, hey, look, we're not, fully okay with this, but hey, it's a fight game, it's going to happen. I feel like what Khabib felt here was that, look, he's doing all these things, and the UFC is just letting him, almost as if the UFC were backing him up, So in a way, I feel like that's how Khabib feels, like he was wrong.
Sure.
And that's where I feel like the UFC is at fault. The UFC should do something. It's like, I'm not a father, but, I'm sure if I had a kid and he's going off to college, I'm sure he's going to be drinking, right? Or she. But you still, as a parent, you have to, still say, hey, don't drink,
Dana used to always have back in the day when he did his scrums and everything, he'd always used to have a little go-to saying that every day when he steps out of bed, before his foot hits the ground, he's putting out fires. Like there's some shit he's dealing in. He used to say it just like that. I feel like the fires he has to put out these days are just completely different than they were back then. Back then, he had control. It was, he was the one kind of controlling the environment. Right now, it's all the inmates at all times, and I feel like it's a whole different vibe now, man. And
I don't see how I don't know that this is some kind of tipping point. I'm not that kind of a prognosticator, but this kind of situation can't last. Something bad will happen, or something good will happen. But this, as a means of operating, I just don't see how it has any shelf life. Everyone's angry all the time, and when they get power, they maximally exercise their leverage. Oh, well, my friend, who, by the way, Dana's right to get rid of Zubaira Tukhugov, just flat out. And there's a lot of other things he should have done beyond that on Conor's side. But okay, about that, he's right. But if you get rid of him, you're going to get rid of me. Like everyone's hitting the nuclear option every time.
Well, what happened to the rules, though? What happened to the code of conduct? What happened to understanding the athletic?
That die.
Yeah. Okay. So when I was one of the people, I live here in New York. I was one of the people fighting for the legalization of MMA in New York. And when I had to get people to sign the petition, especially people who were like, "No, MMA is too violent," blah blah blah. I had to bring up the Chris Weidmans of the world, and I had to bring up these people and say, no, they're family men and women, they're good people, martial arts, it's a sport, blah, 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 respect, discipline, blah, 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 all that. And I would bring up the UFC code of conduct. And then when the Dolly thing happened, I look like an idiot. And when the Khabib thing happens, I kind of I'm thinking about all those people I had signed the petition, and I'm like, man, you know what I mean? I'm like, sorry, it's not everyone though. And so I guess I wish that we could across the board. The drama can be there, but does it have to be all the time now? Does it have to be, can we find a happy medium where the storylines are still something interesting without it getting that severe.
But it's super complex as well because sure we want the UFC to do something, but then we also talk about them being employees or independent contractors.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
That's why they've backed off the code.
So now it takes things into a way deeper. You know, this whole situation is very complex. I don't know what the answer is, but doing nothing is definitely not it.
No.
I mean, this is Samuel Huntington's thesis come to life, man. The clash of civilizations. We're watching it, right?
Yeah.
The last thing I'd say about this, because I don't want to spend the whole time on Conor Khabib. We could do this the whole show, but I really don't. I just don't want to. The last thing I'd say about this is, you know, you mentioned that you don't blame the UFC for the storyline. I don't know that I do either. But then you watch that John Malkovich thing that they did, and there's no mention of it at all. And there's all this soaring rhetoric. And yes, that's partly artificial to raise emotions, which I thought they did rather well. But I always believed, and I had a debate with somebody online about it, they were like, you can't tell the story without the bus. And I think that's true. But to me, that fight, the bus always seemed like some weird distraction.
Yeah.
The story to me was about this huge star, gone for a long time, coming back against this uncrowned, well, he was a crowned king, but in the sense of resolving who was really the top dog. Essentially this uncrowned king who had arisen in his absence, and it was that fundamental tension. I thought that was really all you needed. Was the bus helpful for selling? I mean, who could say otherwise?
No.
Of course it will. Of course it will.
But what it was to the...
But all that, it's like the story is, the bus is part of the story.
It's more
The story
than
is
that.
also what you kind of make it a little bit.
But the story is definitely the wrestling and jiu-jitsu is Conor's Achilles heel, and here's a master at it. And that's really enough for me, but I also don't want to like hide the thing that really happened as well. So yeah.
Fight fans are going to love exactly what you just pointed out. We're going to love that. That was the most compelling thing to me. But I think that it's just the wider, the people who gawk at car crashes. I mean, honestly, that's why it gets to this. It swells up to the number it does.
Yeah, but now it's a car crash. Wait till it becomes all much worse.
I've said this 100 times. There are fans of martial arts and there's fans of violence, and unfortunately, we attend the same events. Yeah. And this is where we are.
All right. Well, look, we could go on forever about this, but I just don't want to. I'd rather talk about some other things. So let's talk about something I would argue much more positive note.
Okay.
Yesterday.
We'll see. Positive, really.
Yeah, yesterday, my number one fan, it turns out, is going to be back in the octagon. That's right. Jon Jones returns. He'll be facing Alexander Gustafsson in his return to the octagon. Got to tell you, I think this is great, and I mean it sincerely. I think this is great news for MMA. Frankly, I think it's good news for the UFC. Yeah. Every time they get good news, then there's bad news the day later. But you know what? They got that good news. So he's going to come back.
They used to try to offset the bad news by introducing something good. To take away the headlines.
But then when they do that, it's like the butterfly effect. The bad news circles back around. Okay, but anyway, here's the point. He's going to be facing Alexander Gustafsson. It'll be the main event for UFC 232, December 29th in Las Vegas. Daniel Cormier. Good news is, when he fights, we'll talk about him later, when he fights Derek Lewis, he will get to defend his title as the champ, albeit in one weight class, but he'll still have the two belts. He will be stripped by the point that fight takes place. And of course, those guys fought in what can arguably be the best light heavyweight, if not the best outright fight in UFC history, UFC 165 back in Toronto 2013. Okay, Danny, I will go to you.
Setup.
Danny, I will go to you. Here's the question, not whether MMA is excited about it, although I think that they are. What is left? What more can Jon Jones do in this chapter of his career?
I think this is probably the most important chapter of his career. I think, and to me, is like when Fedor was in his prime, everybody undoubtedly was like, yo, that's the greatest fighter ever. When Anderson Silva was destroying everyone and just putting his hands on, at one point everybody's like, that's the GOAT, period. I feel like Jon Jones got to that borderline but never crossed it. A lot of people were saying, dude, this is the GOAT. And some still had, some questions, but he never crossed it where it's like, okay, that's it. He's the greatest of all time. Obviously, like, stuff that went in cage and, outside things that happened, prevented him from that. I feel like right now he's still young. He's still in his prime. He looked great against, the last time out against DC. I think he's fighting to prove that he's the greatest of all time and solidify that. He's fighting for legacy. And at this point, I mean, he doesn't have much time left. So these next few years, he's got to put in the work to make sure he leaves no doubt in anybody's mind that he's the greatest.
I mean, he's fighting, too, for how many millions has he squandered over the years? I mean, the bottom line is this is a guy who could have been uber rich in this game, and I'm sure he still has plenty of money. But at the same time, he has nowhere near the amount he could have been making. So I agree with you 100%, but part of that legacy, I think, is like he could build his empire back up. He can start to make money again. Remember, the last time he fought Gustafsson, he was sponsored by Gatorade and Nike. These were big deals. Like, all of a sudden, we had these emblems in the octagon. Remember that? He showed up. was kind of the high point. So it's in a weird way. 5 years later, he returns to the where he was at the pinnacle to fight the same guy again. It ended up being an epic fight. I think it's the perfect opponent for him because I've wanted to see that rematch just like so many other people this whole time. I feel like Gustafsson's whole existence has been kind of like to get back to that moment. So Jones is back in that moment. So it makes sense. And you wonder to what extent, all the things that he, who he is this time, because he went into the last one. I felt like he handled himself perfectly at UFC 214, was it? Yeah. With the Cormier. He handled himself perfectly, I thought, except for shooting you down in the questionnaire. But he really did. And then, of course, he got his next black eye right afterwards. But how does he play? Like, how does he play this whole fight? There's a whole fascination to him, man, because I think you're right. He's on the cusp. I want to call him the GOAT. I think there's plenty of people who will. Even with his asterisk, even being stripped 3 times, three different suspensions, everything, people still want to call him the GOAT. It's the most important part of his career because now it's like, does he take it all the way or is he just like, does the story become what a waste ultimately he was?
It's symbolic ultimately too, because like you said, he even admitted that when he fought Gus the first time, he had still been partying, he had still had those old ways, and maybe that's why it was so close. So now he's coming back, supposedly renewed, anew, vindicated in a lot of ways, because USADA is saying that they think that he didn't take anything on purpose. Maybe this is the perfect thing. Maybe it is the perfect storm, the way to start the new year, because it's December 29th and all that. I don't know. There's, again, mixed feelings about Jon Jones as well. People are just like, I'm done with him. I'm done caring about him. And I'm like, you're lying, because the second there's an opportunity to see this tremendous athlete perform, you tune in. And I think that is true. And
at UFC 214, just seeing him again, back up on the podium and talking to Daniel Cormier, it all comes back. All those old feelings of like, whoa, this guy is the great. Like, you remember his rise. You remember him beating those guys. I feel like all of that will come back too.
Don't you get a Count of Monte Cristo vibe with this guy? Like a revenge vibe?
Yes, but the problem is he's had it before. So it's like you're on like part 2 of the, Monte Cristo is coming back again.
Yeah, I had Chael Sonnen in studio and we talked about it. I don't think he's suffering any slights lightly at all. I think he's out there, and I think on top of that will translate into the octagon itself. Like, to your point, he's out there trying to prove he's the GOAT. I think that's his mission this time. I think that is like, yes, get rich, all that kind of stuff. But honestly, I'm told he has enough money where if he was careful with it, he could live the rest of his life just fine, doesn't need it.
Sure,
I mean,
this is about much more. This is about how will he be remembered.
And I feel like he cares about that greatly. If you look at a lot of the conversations and back and forth he's had with DC, he goes, you think if I were taking serious, you think the kick that made me, do the kick, and he's posted videos out there. He's out there, people are tarnishing, his GOAT status based on, the test failures. And I think he's out there trying to prove that, hey, look, this was me. I was putting in the work. I was doing this. This was my technique. And, I think that's very important for him.
Yeah.
I'm glad that it isn't DC that he's coming back to fight.
Really?
Because I think that I want to build up to that narrative again. Yeah. It's almost like a repeat again in my mind. And that I think Gus deserves and gives a little bit more of a challenge as well. Body type wise, for tons of technical reasons.
Remember the first fight was promoted about how tall they were?
Yeah. There's a lot of really
being a factor though.
Yeah.
It's like so weird.
I know all of us were like, the UFC is so dumb, and then it ended up being completely right. But, it's kind of funny. All right, Chuck, how do you expect him to look? And here's the funny thing: Sean Sheehan, shouts to him, was pointing out on Twitter. Since they last fought, I believe Jones has had 4 fights. Since then, Gustafsson's only had 5. But
that's kind of crazy.
But it feels like Gustafsson, and I could be wrong about this. It could be my impression. Don't misunderstand me. I am not in any way, shape, or form suggesting he is shot porn. That's not what I'm saying. All I am saying is, since that time, if by no virtue other than John's had the time off and doesn't spar that much in the gym, I feel like he's had less miles put on him in that time.
Oh, yeah.
How relevant a factor that will be, you could say, well, maybe he will also be rusty. What do you expect from both?
I mean, I really do, because what you guys were talking about, I really believe he does believe he's coming back to prove something and change the narrative once and for all to how great he is. I think that that's his mission. So I think he's going to be ready, and I think he's been like a bowstring being pulled back, waiting to let go for this type of thing, because it'll be what, 15 months, whatever it is, back to his last fight. But again, where he's had to just sit there and wait to prove it, and I feel like. Just given all that, and the guys he's around too, his coaches are good coaches, and I think that they instill in him something that brings him back, back to earth a lot. And I feel like He'll be hungry. I think that that's the most important thing. Even when he wasn't hungry, he was dominant. You know, even when he was partying and doing all this stuff, I think he'll be hungry. And the only thing I will say is that he's 31 now. You start to, a lot of athletes obviously start to turn a little bit at this age. So there could be a little bit of a factor there in that certain, but I'd be shocked though if he came out and looked any less than he has, to be honest with you.
Okay, but let me pause at this, Phoenix. What if Gustafsson wins? What does that do to everything?
Oh, wow. I mean,
people aren't even talking about it, but like Gustafsson's not a pushover.
No,
like, he's a very talented
not. And that
fighter.
fight
He was winning the fight going into the
right.
way late in the fourth round, right? Was that spinning
elbow?
elbow.
That fight was definitely close. I say if Gus wins the situation, then we look at DC and Gus again, right? Is that a case? I mean, but what is the situation with Brock Lesnar? Is that going to happen?
He's just out there doing his stuff.
So then I don't like saying, hey, let's match DC up again, because I know that's a check that.
Let me interrupt if I may. I meant for legacy for both guys.
Oh, well, I think that kind of makes people think Jon had too much time off. Possibly he lost the opportunity, ring rust. Remember when he came back against OSP, even though he was huge, he wasn't the explosive, quick, athletic Jon. But his body type was different. He's going to be, he's gone back to less of the power training this time around too. But if Gus wins, it will definitely change the dialogue about how people feel about Jon.
I think if Gus wins, I don't think DC's coming back to 205 at any time soon.
Yeah.
And, Jon does have a win over Gus, so I think a trilogy would probably be, would happen later in 2019. But yeah, it's interesting because I feel like Alexander Gustafsson has always been right there against Daniel Cormier. Close fight, man. He did really well, but didn't do just enough to get the title. Same against Jon Jones. And, winning the title, not only winning the title, but defeating Jon Jones in some way just puts a nice end to his career. And look, he can call it quits, and that's a fantastic career. But in some way, it validates his career. As far as Jon Jones, I think the narrative would be, man, what a waste of talent. When this guy was on top, he was truly the best. But, I don't think it'll be, it'll end there. We'll see what happens post, because I'm sure he'll have a few fights even if he loses against Gus. But to your point, it's very funny that you, mentioned, how many fights both fighters have had, and given, Jon Jones suspensions and whatnot. But Jon Jones fought the most recently than Alexander Gustafsson, which is crazy, which is insane.
Oh yeah.
But if you look at like Alexander Gustafsson, man, he's had some tough fights. That knockout against Anthony Johnson, the Cormier fight was brutal, and then since the Cormier fight, he's had to withdraw from 2 fights due to injury. So I wonder what kind of version of Gus we're gonna get in there. I really do.
What I want to know is, say that Gustafsson does go in there and for some reason he just scores like a second round KO. Is it going to seem as iconic of a moment and as crazy as like seeing the sheen of invincibility brought off something? Because when we saw like Chris Weidman knock out Anderson Silva, it was just like the shocking thing.
Couldn't believe it.
You couldn't imagine it happening. Like it was one of these type of things. Or you see Ronda Rousey in her fight. Obviously, it was like it had a similar thing because so many people had built up this narrative that she's invincible. Well, will it feel like that for Jon Jones?
Well, the odds were those two were a little bit out of whack, and I tweeted about this yesterday. The odds last time heading into fight night, because they started at minus 800 for Jon, a ridiculous favorite.
Whoa!
And then he ended at right before the fight, he was minus 1,000, which is like completely insane. This one he's starting out at minus 280. I think a much healthier. So probably not. But I also believe, Chuck, that the knives are out for him. Not from, believe it or not from people like me. I'm happy to see him back. I think MMA needs him. But I've detected that there's a lot of fighters, media, even some fans. They are waiting for this guy to slip so they can just stab. Yeah. And I think he knows it. And so any opportunity for them to get that in, if he slips up, like, here's what's so amazing. He's out there basically trying to prove one version of himself correct. The one we all thought when he was out there running through the Shoguns, or the one where he was, missing fights because he had some court case or whatever, all the USADA stuff. He's out there to show this is the real one. And any slip up will result in maximal
he has tried, even his most casual fans, but anybody who was a real Jon Jones fan, he has tried them to the extreme to stick with him. It is ridiculous. Imagine if you were just I love Jon Jones early on, and you tried to keep sticking with him. Could you have stuck through all of that? It's ridiculous. It just take away the fact that he hasn't been able to fight alone. Well, what are you rooting for at this point?
Yeah.
And how he has, dude, it can't be, no one ever wants to give Jon sympathy, I guess, but I will. It can't be easy growing up in your 20s as a rich from nothing to something and not knowing how to navigate the space. But do you guys remember what fight was it where he had stopped the mugger early in the day?
That was in New York, right?
Yeah, it was when
I mean, you can't believe the transformation he's undergone.
But he's all those people. He's all those people.
Yeah,
he's like the kid that parties at night. He's also I've seen him in the gym. He used to train with Phil Nurse, and I used to see him train. And I would see him with teenagers, like playing with them and teaching them moves and spending extra time to take pictures and all those type of things. Legit nice guy. And then, I don't know how he is in his nightlife or in his home life or, even giving interviews. He was always super gracious and nice to me. I never had a problem with him. What if he's all those people? I mean, we're all those people. I could be super nice and then also be cursing at somebody in traffic. I mean, it doesn't mean that I'm not. We're so multidimensional. And yeah, I think that Jon was maybe around the wrong people at certain times. Didn't really take responsibility for certain things. I think he has impulse control issues, which most 20-year-olds do, right? So who knows? Maybe maybe he is who he was then, and maybe he's different now because he's 30 now.
It's only significant in the sense that he was supposed to be like the Michael Jordan of the sport. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
He meant like that to the sport.
He was the very first superstar.
Yeah.
I remember when he was already at the top. Conor McGregor was coming up, and I remember them taking picters and stuff. He and as you mentioned earlier, he had the Nike deal. He was a very first superstar that you're like, man, this guy can cross some boundaries. Him and Ronda Rousey, right? There was a selected few that sort of.
There weren't many. There still aren't, but he's still in that echelon though. That's what's funny. We've just kind of put him away. So that's what makes it fun for us. Like I said, when he comes back, I think you're 100% right. He is all those people, but he needs to be the guy that he started now. He has to be that guy again, and he's got to sustain it, I think, for the rest of his career.
You can't always blame his age either, because there are many people at 20-something-year-olds that are super mature, that can handle lots of things. Like, you've interviewed Kayla Harrison and all that type of stuff. You've seen her career and her legacy and how she was in her earlier years, too. So I hate always blaming his age. I just think that I also don't think that he's all bad, and I also don't think that he's all good.
I said this before about Jon, which was the stuff he did, wrecking the Bentley and whatever else he did, running from the scene of a crime or whatever. It's like, I've had friends do that, all that shit. I've had friends do all that shit, and they ended up being pretty great citizens in the end.
Right.
They just had to get that part out of their system. Some of them were veterans. Some of them fought in wars. Some of them ended up being attorneys. And so people don't ever want to acknowledge that, you're right. It can't be this perennial excuse. At the same time, what happens in your 20s, while you can't ignore it, it doesn't necessarily define your future. All right. True. Now, speaking of Jones has a rival. He goes with the name Daniel Cormier. He's going to be fighting down the street in about 2 weeks. Danny Segura.
As of time of taping, he is.
Yes.
We never know.
Yeah, right. I mean, in fact, my phone's on airplane mode. I'm going to turn it on and the fight's off. I don't know.
The way that card is done.
Right. Danny, I'll go to you on this one. I have to say, where do we even start with all this? Hold off on the Nate Diaz, Dustin Poirier stuff for just a moment, please. Even though it's all a big part of the story.
Let's start with Derek Lewis' Instagram.
Derek Lewis' balls get set on fire from athletic competition.
Yeah.
And it
says he can't fight 5 rounds.
Says he can't fight 5 rounds. Takes a beating, by the way. He wins in the most incredible Hail Mary fashion, because that's Derek Lewis. Right? And then lies. I saw you, Derek Lewis, lying to me on the air. I'm going to get him. I had him on the show, and I'm like, hey, you heard anything about it? He's like, man, I haven't heard anything about that. 5 minutes later, Brett Okamoto breaks the news. You could have told me the scoop, Derek. Anyway, long story short, he blows up to this huge Instagram star. People kind of know who he is, too, for maybe the right reasons. Anyway, Cormier is going to fight him. Look, they had Sajara Eubanks versus Valentina Shevchenko on this card. Now she's back. We're going to unpack all this in a second. But I got to say, and I didn't want to exactly bring up the Nate Diaz thing, but he's not on the card anymore. Did the UFC make the right call? I think you can argue that maybe did.
That's such a loaded question. Did they make the right call ultimately for promotion? Yes, 100%. Is a heavyweight title fight between the champ and the king of Instagram bigger than Valentina Shevchenko versus Sajara Eubanks? I would say yes.
Yeah.
But the way they handled it, I don't agree with that. I think it's pretty messed up the way they handle it. Because look, you're offering a life-changing opportunity to someone, and then you're taking that away.
Yeah.
That's super messed up. But look, about this fight, and even Derek's suspension runs till November 6th, if I'm not mistaken.
Please, I have no worries that will be.
But I think ultimately the UFC did a very smart move, because look, We live in especially in MMA where things just constantly moving are constantly changing. Look, Derek Lewis is going to be, I don't want to say a forgotten story, but he's definitely going to go on the back burner a few months from now when Jon Jones comes back, when, all these other things happen. Right now, Derek Lewis is hot. And so are his balls. Yeah. But man, I mean, look, his Instagram's blowing up. Everybody liked this. Look, his post-fight interview, I think, has like 3 million views on the UFC.
Really?
Yeah. So as soon as you break that news, hey, look, this guy's fighting for the title. People are going to read, even if you're not a huge fan, oh, that's the guy who said this funny thing. Oh, that's the guy with the Instagram. Oh, that's, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and it's just happening weeks from now. So they're like, okay, I'll watch that fight.
I always thought it was kind of more like a myth. So we talk about guys, there's a huge fight at the top, Conor McGregor against Khabib. You think that the guys below that, you're like, maybe they catch a little bit of that glory, just by being on that big card. But in most cases, I always feel like, probably not much, because everybody's going to remember what happened at the top. That's what they're going to be talking about. But his case was really, really weird. I felt like he got over huge just from that whole thing. And so I feel like the UFC is very smart to say, like, okay, wait, this dude just blew up. Put him on there right now because nobody will complain.
So you don't have to talk smack. Exactly. You can just talk about your balls from now on.
So I think that the UFC had to look
Mission accomplished, Phoenix.
I guess the weird part about it is obviously left field matchmaking, because we were already contemplating Cormier in a whole different circumstance.
Brock Lesnar.
Brock Lesnar, not sure what's going on with that. You're thinking about him another. So you're not really putting those two guys together. But given the circumstances, I feel like the UFC probably looked at it and they thought, this is better than anything else we could possibly come up with right now, and people will talk about it.
And
so here
and
we
they
are.
got lucky because the backlash they were getting for that main event for UFC 230 was bad.
I was
not just verbal backlash, ticket sale, lack of response. Phoenix, how do you feel about this main event?
I like it. I just didn't think it was right now. But I guess you got to fill that slot, so that's why it happened. Look, Derek Lewis is great. I think that he was eventually moving up that ladder anyway. That was the road he was taking. Am I super impressed with him? No. Because he was losing. He was losing up until that point. Okay, you have a very, 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 very good right hand, but I think DC's dealt with that before. I mean, we saw that against Rumble Johnson, but I would have watched it anyway because I want to see all the Derek Lewis stuff. I want to see more interviews with him. I want to see more of him. So I get it. But it's just like
he can ruin a lot of narratives at Madison Square Garden.
But the sports science background in me, this is what I did before this job, was I'm like, you just took a bunch of damage, dude. Like, but I get it.
I mean,
This is the one thing he told me that I think was truthful, which was I asked him, like, would you take that if it was offered? He was like, look, if the money's right, yeah, I would.
Sure.
So it seems like UFC came off their pockets.
You would mention, I think it was you who mentioned in a tweet, like Tony Ferguson against Nate Diaz, and for just a split second, you actually let your mind go there for a minute. I was like, no, that would have been the one that would have really been something. Because I think that, again, Tony Ferguson, people know who he is now. I feel like it's time to put him in whatever big spot he can get. But obviously, he took a lot of damage as well. And this is just one of those unfortunate circumstances. So bottom line is, if Derek can get that payday, you know what I mean? Coming from where he's come from, man, the time at Sugarland in Texas and everything else to here, good for him, man. And honestly, the puncher's chance this is the liveliest puncher's chance you'll ever see because the dude has that kind of power.
And a lot of that is heavyweight fights. You know, that's the allure that it brings.
What's great about
you never know what's going to happen.
When you see him as a 5-1 underdog, you think, well, nobody in the heavyweight division should be that big of an underdog because any one punch changes the complexion of the fight.
This is exactly how I went. I need to do cardio. Here's the check. I'll go in the treadmill now.
I know. Well, that's so Derek Lewis. That's Derek Lewis in a nutshell.
Yeah, here's the thing. You're going to get Derek Lewis post-fight speech one way or the other about 3 weeks apart. So that's not so.
And forget about that. All the promos leading up to it. I think he already posted one on Twitter, was it, with the Popeyes chicken? Man,
that was great.
He told me else. I thought it was he's an honest guy, Derek Lewis. He's a funny guy too. Remember, he told Brian Sand after beating Travis Brown that did the body shots hurt? And he was like, no, I had to dookie. It's like, all right, man. I mean, he lets it roll.
He's like the movie Liar Liar with Jim Carrey. It's like he just says everything.
I like how you started this about calling him out for lying to you, and then you say, "What an honest man" at the end. Well, see, that's the kind of complex character we're doing.
Look, fighters.
I know what you're saying.
Interviews fighters all the time. They strategically lie constantly.
No, I know.
So it's not him. It's like all of them do it. But here's what he did say this too. He goes, "Look, man, everybody I fight at this point." He didn't say this his whole career. He's talking about now.
Yeah.
Everybody I fight is better than me. Everybody.
Yeah.
But the difference is I got a ridiculous punch and I don't quit. And it takes me pretty far. And I was like, yeah, that sounds about right. So, look,
And who doesn't love that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. Under any normal circumstance, should this fight be made? Absolutely not. There's no way, to the point you raised about all the damage. Are you kidding me? This late notice, can you even really sell this? Will it really make a difference? I mean, by the way, what about DC's hand?
Yeah.
Like, the whole thing is a giant mess, which brings up another portion of this conversation, which is about Stipe Miocic, Phoenix. Apparently he said he was perfectly willing to take that fight, and I guess, according to what I think his wife put this on Instagram, I could be wrong about that, but that they were told, well, DC's not available, and then they put together DC versus Lewis anyway.
More little fibs.
So, number one, I guess, what do you make of that? But then two, more importantly, what I really want to get you to answer here is, was that the right fight to make?
Well, I think if I'm selling tickets, I might say I think the fans have seen Stipe already. Maybe people weren't clamoring for that rematch, and Derek Lewis is popular. So that's the business angle of it. What's fair? Yeah, I think Stipe is the fair one to say because he held on to that belt for the longest. He is the more interesting of the two athletes as far as technique goes. He would have a better game plan going into DC because I'm sure he sleeps at night thinking, you know that. I mean, everybody who's ever competed before, when you're done with it, and if you lose especially, you're like, he's got a plan. So he's probably been sitting there with blueprints on how to beat DC, and that's not going to happen now.
Way bigger gamble, too, obviously. If you put Miocic in there, Daniel Cormier would be in bigger danger than Derek Lewis under the circumstances. So I feel like that I'm
going to bring that up when Derek Lewis is the new heavyweight champion of the world.
It's tough to talk about that sort of thing because I'm sure that it goes through some matchmaking mind but at the same time you're like, you don't want to look past guys like Derek Lewis because that's stupid. But if you look at Miocic, who has he wants to get in there, he is very good, and he's had time now. He's fought him, he's a pretty smart fighter. I think he gets back in there. He brings doubt to a situation. Maybe he eliminates the DC, Lesnar fight for good, or any of those iterations that we've been talking about. He could eliminate those just by going in there, and then all of a sudden you have to talk about a trilogy. Just a lot more complex.
Sure.
It's definitely a bigger gamble, and I also like to add, let's look back. Stipe had some issues working with the UFC. Negotiation-wise, they butt heads. So do you want potentially another champion that you are not, in the best terms with, or do you want to have Derek Lewis or DC, people you can easily work.
I think the business end like that probably plays in way more than we realize.
These guys, when they have the belt, they think that they're immune, and they realize, man, your title reign, unless you're St. Pierre or something, your title reign is not going to last long. I had Stipe on my show, I don't know how long ago this was, maybe a year or two ago, something like that. And I asked him, I straight up asked him, do you care about being a celebrity? And his answer was not at all, doesn't care. It's like, and that's fine when you're the champ, man, but when you're not and all the leverage is gone, they remember that. They're like elephants over the UFC office, man. They remember all that stuff. And so I don't know how much, and then when your phone doesn't ring or they give you the roundabout, it's like, I'm not saying it's the right thing, but about Khabib, can you be surprised,
That's a very real thing.
And also promotion-wise, Derek Lewis is blowing up right now. I feel like going into the first fight with DC and Stipe, the biggest selling point was, look, this is the most successful UFC heavyweight. He's killing it. He doesn't have that anymore. He doesn't have the belt. So making a rematch at this point, I think probably the Lewis.
What's funny about Lewis is he sells these interviews at the end, they just spontaneously, it just occurred to him. None of this seems rehearsed. You know what I'm saying? He just goes in there and does something like that, and you feel like it really was just on a whim.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's really true, but it feels that way. Right. So it's humorous.
I want to make sure I give Bellator enough time because they do have not one but two shows this week. So very, very quickly, let's talk about Nate Diaz. Chuck, I'll throw this one to you first. You know what I'm really worried about? I thought the Dustin Poirier fight on New York City, if they'd had a Jon Jones headliner, I was like, you got everything you needed to get Nate Diaz back. And once he gets back, who knows if he stays, but you like your chances there. And of course, they never got the right headliner. Everything kind of fell through. I think his enthusiasm had waned before Dustin even got injured. And Dustin, by the way, never been injured before in 30 fights. I feel bad for Dustin Poirier. But now Nate Diaz, man, when is he going to be back? Because you're looking around, and I don't see anything other than Conor McGregor that's going to get him to come back.
I mean, he said he could beat Khabib. So
right. I'm sure that's the next fight they're going to make.
So I thought this was the perfect fight for him, honestly, because of the stylistic. I thought that they would really go out there and put on the kind of fight that would really make you crave both guys. Do we see him again in whatever situation? So it really does hurt him quite a bit. We've been talking about this too. I want to know where Nate Diaz is as a star at this point. You want to know, can he sell fights on his own? Even if they're not putting him into the main event, you just want to know how big his star conversion has been through the Conor McGregor part of it. And so you don't get any of that. And it was this fight has been so strange because it would come in and out of focus. 1 minute he's fighting, and then they're both like, "No, we're not fighting. No, we want for this. No, I'm not fighting." You know what I mean? So it just feels like we got the worst case scenario, honestly, that it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I don't know, but to be completely honest, man, I mean, they finally got him to agree to Dustin Poirier in the sense that probably wouldn't have made sense to us at some point. So I'm guessing they're going to find somebody like that, somebody, you know.
Look around, man.
I know, I agree. I don't know who it would be. I couldn't name who that would be right this second, but you just hope it's sooner rather than
outside
later.
of Conor McGregor.
Do we know the extent of Dustin Poirier's injury and how long he's going to be out?
A little birdie told me about 2 months.
Okay, well, you can look. Nate Diaz has been on the shelf for quite a while. I'm sure he wouldn't mind waiting a few more months for the right match.
I'd be shocked though if they don't do McGregor and Diaz.
Who knows when McGregor's going to come back?
That's true.
He's going to supposedly deal with repercussions as well.
Yeah, that's
right?
true.
So
that's true.
What do you think about Nate Diaz being gone off this card? Are you worried that that this is it for 2018? Here's the thing. This is my point about the malcontents. It's like, does Nate Diaz have a right? I mean, people disagree, but does Nate Diaz have a right to be angry at the UFC for the way he was, improperly treated or not marketed? You can have that debate, but I would argue to some degree, yes, of course. And everyone who's got a beef down the lines, it's like people cheerlead this, and I'm thinking at first I cheerleaded it too. And I'm not suggesting I'm not cheerleading in the sense that I don't want to acknowledge anyone's legitimate grievance. But as a fight fan, how the fuck do we win by this? Khabib doesn't want to fight. God knows when Conor's going to come back. Nate doesn't want to fight. Jon has a bad relationship with Dana White. Now I guess he has a better relationship with like the other guys involved in Endeavor. But it's like everyone is kind of like, yeah, stick it to the UFC. When they stick it to the UFC, they're not trying to stick it to the fans, but we end up suffering in the end.
Honestly, I don't know if we see Nate Diaz in 2018. I doubt it. I'd be surprised if we do. I think that it's either he waits for Dustin Poirier to get healthy and then you run that fight again, or he fights Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor at this point, he's still a huge star regardless of not being in the title picture just yet. But it's a good fight for Diaz. It's a good fight for McGregor, and I think you can run that early in 2019.
I think people will be happy with anyone that Nate decides to fight.
Yeah.
I think anything's an interesting fight for him. He's
honestly,
got a cool style. He's funny. People just want to see him. I pretty much I would be happy with whoever they put him up against.
All right. All right. Well, that said, I feel bad because I put Bellator at the end, but thanks a lot, Khabib. You messed up my show clock. All right, so let's get to Bellator right now. They have not one, but two shows. Bellator 207. This will be on Friday night at the Mohegan Sun Arena in Uncasville, Connecticut. It'll be one half of the semifinals. Matt Mitrione taking on Ryan Bader. A series of other fights as well. The following night, they're going to be in Uniondale, which is, I think, Long Island, New York, if I'm not mistaken, when they're going to have Chael versus Fedor in the main event, and, of course, a series of other fights. So then you'll know who the finals are going to be for the Heavyweight Grand Prix. Phoenix, how are you feeling ahead of the doubleheader that Bellator is about to stage?
I like the idea of this guy beat this guy, so this guy is beating this guy. And I like that clearly set out for me. I don't know if I want to, because this is my job and I have to watch fights all the time. I like space. I would like a little space to digest things, because then I think you wind up forgetting stars or people on the card that you might have been interested in. So sometimes I think it's too much back to back. But I do like the idea. I like tournaments. I think that, not in the same night, of course, like when the way Glory used to do it, used to give me a heart attack. But, doing this and having something to finalize it and say who's the best, I'm really down for that. It's one of the big things that we always criticize the UFC for.
I'm pretty excited for this. One of my biggest criticisms
or just some resolution to the tournament, you mean?
Yes, because one of my biggest criticisms was this tournament's going way too slow. I mean, we almost forget about it. Like, oh, here are the quarterfinals, and then we kind of just forget about it. Here we're getting the semifinals matchups just getting resolved in a span of 30 hours?
Right.
So we know who's going to be in the final. We know who potentially is going to be the Bellator heavyweight champion, which means something. It is a relevant title. You can make the argument that the welterweight champion in Bellator is better than the UFC. Same thing with the middleweight. So holding a Bellator title in 2018 does mean something. And these guys had to beat people to get there. So I'm pretty excited. Look, Fedor versus Chael Sonnen is still a matchup that I can't really put together in my head. I'm not sure how it's going to look. Yeah. So I'm kind of just expecting whatever. And obviously Bader, I want to see how he looks, against Mitrione, a true heavyweight. So I think it's a pretty good card.
It's to me, this is almost like the Super Bowl of the event, because it's like those two matchups are probably as good as it's going to get. Like, so whatever iteration we get between the two winners, I just don't think it's going to have as big of as a buzz to it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think that they purposely designed, I think they got the perfect brackets, honestly.
Yeah.
They got the perfect setups. And that Fedor fight, man, with Sonnen, it's amazing to me that it's happening. Because, you go back any number of years, and this might be one of the biggest fights in history, the way Chael Sonnen, where his star was at one point, where Fedor's star was, if you put them, you align them at just a certain point in time, this is a huge fight. So, to me, that's fun. I love stuff like that. Obviously, Fedor is not who he used to be, but neither is Chael. And, I just worry about if whoever wins that fight, though, going against the other winner, that's not going to look as pretty.
You know what's interesting to me? This is completely made up in my mind. I acknowledge as much, but you know what it feels like to me? It feels like once the DAZN, I'll never get tired of being angry at that word. Once the DAZN deal was signed, Bellator got a pep in their step.
Yeah.
They put that welterweight.
They
I thought their last show was a freaking home run.
Yeah.
Again, things didn't go so great for Rory, but for the fan,
great card.
I mean, you got
It really was.
and then Douglas Lima with the crush card. I mean, it was ridiculous, right?
How about the shine they just got off this last UFC card? They've got a guy right in the middle of it.
Right.
Like, how are they going to market that dude?
Dylan Dennis, Aaron Pico showing up, and Dylan Dennis being the world's most hated man. Dude, I'm telling you, that's going
to be a star now, man. Like,
they must have been like, yes,
Guy that fought the UFC lightweight champion.
Okay, but here's my point. They had like a bit of a, and they still do. Don't get me wrong. Like they'll still riding that high. It feels like this is the carryover from the end of the Paramount era, and it's still on Paramount, of course, but like the end of the Paramount era into the DAZN era, and so it just feels like, how do I explain this? This is the vibe I get. That they still have this momentum, but they have to finish off the programming from an outdated era. And then carry everything forward. So I'm not look, I'm happy to see. I had Chael in studio. I'm pumped to see Chael fight Fedor. I hope it's a big success for them. But on the other hand, it just feels like not old news, but tying up the end of the loose ends, and then we're going to go head first into the DAZN era.
I agree. I completely agree. Who did the advertisement, though, that was like, if enough of the circus was
the print ad that they bought or something like that.
Was that DAZN?
That was DAZN,
Yeah,
yes.
It was interesting.
For folks who know, they had like a circus. They're like DAZN, 88 fights a year, fights only, skip the circus or some
Something like
version of that.
yeah.
Do you have any comment about my hunch?
I agree with you 100%, and I do think that it's always like that old quote about being tied to a dying animal, because they're just tied to something that was not going anywhere, and this other thing has actually something to it. So I feel like anytime that's the case, there's enthusiasm, you know what I mean? And I feel like, once again, we're catching that.
Well, there's a shift in the market completely on how people are watching fights now. I mean, I remember the second I heard that HBO was getting rid of boxing, I think I gasped, like,
it's like your whole life.
What does that mean? It just means that, out with the old, in with a new way of doing everything. We remember too that the UFC and Fox, now we're moving to the ESPN situation. So who knows the way content's going to be created now, and the way the entire thing is going to look and feel, and the way things are going to go, and how people digest material.
Obviously going to be similar, right? Like, it's a subscription service, and so it's the right time for Bellator to be making the move, honestly, to kind of get people signed up. I felt like a lot of people signed up for it. Just for the belt. That was, you know what I mean? They had the right event. I thought that they unveiled it just right.
Yeah, look, they've got other good fights on that card, the good fighters. I think Roy Nelson's on the card, Baby Slice is on the card, Benson Henderson is on Saturday's card against Saad Awad. There's actually a lot on both nights. I think
Lorenz Larkin's fighting.
Lorenz Larkin is fighting. I think that's Friday night, if I'm not mistaken.
Friday, so.
I mean, Lorenz Larkin's going to be the card. So they got a lot going on. I just feel like they've mentally pivoted. And they still have to finish off this heavyweight Grand Prix, but they're ready to move forward in a different direction. That going to Hawaii, for example, will enable them to do. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Our last segment. We call it Under the Radar. I always forget. I gave you some extra time today, boys and girls. Under the Radar. Someone asked me this. Is this the craziest week in MMA news history? To me, the gravity of the Strikeforce purchase felt bigger.
Yeah.
But in terms of every day, dude, my phone lines on my show every day have been like waiting list only because of how crazy it's been getting.
Yeah.
You guys not feel that way?
No, I feel that way 100%, man. I mean, it's just different kind of news, right? It's like you had a big fight and you have strange things happen within that fight. It's going to dominate.
There's extra.
Yeah, there's just all the extracurricular stuff. But, Zuffa, you know, when the Fertitas sell the company, that's pretty big too. That has so much ramification that you have to like, you know what I mean? So you could look at, there's multiple phases of this sport. I just think that this one, like you said, it's because it feels so haywire. It feels like so many things are haywire at once. And like you mentioned, there's 20 different opinions from different sections. It just feels like everything's kind of in disarray. The coils are springing out and everything. You know what I mean? Yeah. It just feels like that. It's a little malfunctioned.
All right. Okay, under the radar, there's got to be a gazillion little tiny stories floating out there. Just something you noticed that maybe didn't get enough mention or got a mention, but no one kind of paid attention to it. Doesn't have to break the records of anybody's internet traffic. In fact, preferably if it didn't. So, Chuck, we'll start with you and work this way around. Give me something that's a little bit under the radar.
I mean, I'm just going to take something right off of that card because it was completely buried. But to me, Aspen Ladd at like 23 years old, having that performance, I mean, I was pretty shocked by that, man. I think she's a pretty marketable star too. Like, and I know that sounds, you know, I hate using that kind of term, but she strikes me as somebody that the UFC could actually get behind and have some events around. At 23 years old, she just looked really good. So
still having weight cutting issues, though.
She is, but I think that she's definitely like she 100%. That was a little scary. That even made it crazier, though, the juxtaposition from seeing her shaking on the scale.
She couldn't even get, not shaking on the scale. She couldn't step on the scale.
True.
Wow.
She did one of these numbers, and they couldn't get on the scale.
So, I mean, just from that to her performance, she really stood out.
Right. She looks phenomenal against Tanya Evinger, yeah. Anything small floating out there?
I mean, I'm just going to go with the girl power thing and just kind of say I really thought Michelle Waterson looked great.
She did.
I think that there's an opportunity to kind of mix things up in some of the female divisions as well, and taking a look at what's happening with all of them. I think that, you know, she has a real opportunity. I like Felice a lot, but it was just, I mean, because they had been coming towards each other for so long from the Fight Girls show and everything like that. So, you know, she said some really nice things at the end too. I want to be the first like mom who's a champion, things like that. So, you know, she's going after the belt, something that she wants to do. I think her being dominant the way she did and looking the way she did, I don't know, throwing some of the traditional karate kicks, I love that. I think that there's some opportunities there to let her star rise even more.
Danny?
I also wanted to highlight another performance from that card. Vicente Luque, man. This guy's
wow, what a good call. What a great call.
This guy's killing it. What is he, like 7-1 as a welterweight?
He is not to be trifled with.
He's looking great. His English is coming together pretty well. Obviously young, you know, speaks to that Brazilian market. And man, he's just looking like a killer. And I'm just waiting for a good opportunity to see him against the top guy.
I made this point on the night where he won, which was some guys come out bad out of hell, like Jon Jones, like, oh my God, this guy's the next big thing. Yeah. Some guys never reach that level. And then there's some guys like Demetrius Johnson, and we'll see how far Vicente Luque goes. Example, but they start out, they're like, oh, they're good. But then they get really good. And then they get really good. That's where Vicente Luque is headed, dude, because he looks like an absolute world beater these days. I would love to see him get a good opportunity. And the point you're making.
Him and Masvidal?
Dude, and he's investing investing in his language skills, taking the time to call a fighter out when he has an opportunity to, and say that. You really, really have to appreciate that.
Do you think Dominic Reyes sits in that?
Dominic Reyes is another one that's under the radar. Dominic Reyes, like, I didn't know how good he was because he was blowing through guys. And then when he beat Jared Cannonier, I was like, oh, okay.
Exactly.
That was pretty impressive.
His wins are such a nice mix of things.
Yes.
You know, he's got TKOs, he's got head kicks, he's got submissions. Like, it's I like this kid.
And I would say this is not my under the radar, but we didn't talk about it on the show today because I want to kind of save it for this one. Dude, Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson, I mean, he just defies explanation. I'll say it again. The only guy who can use alchemy to make gold. The only one, man. Didn't have a personal trainer to help him with his knee injury. Comes back with, you know, all the different things and weird things that he does. It doesn't make sense to anybody but him. Gets in there, gets dropped, finds a way to persevere, looked incredible in the end, burst into tears, and everyone's talking about Khabib, and everyone's talking about Nate, and this freaking 230 card, Jon Jones and Conor, and I get it, but you have got to take a moment on this show and anyone else in MMA media. Were you guys not blown away by Tony Ferguson?
And not just that, just his motivational speeches, because the bottom line is he's standing up and he's kind of like in that media tent when he's kind of, were you in there? You came back. I don't know if you were in there when he was doing it. I missed Tony on the way back. He was, you know, he's just standing there holding court. And I was like, man, where's this guy been? I know he's been slowly emerging like this, but to me, he was
another guy who didn't come out as a world beater right away and became one.
Yeah. And I mean, just the style of fighting. Just what he does in there. I mean,
and you would think coming off that injury, like he would fight more careful. No. Pressure, 100%. You know, he's in it, which is very scary.
And of course, we had Duke Rufus on the show on Monday talking about the stoppage. I thought that was really important. My real under the radar is I like talking about the other combat sports in this space a little bit. EBI for the men is now all combat jiu-jitsu. The women will be sub only, but the men will be strikes. Now you can't like close the fist, but it's like the pancrase style. You can slap and then you can use the palm, which by the way, under the right competitor is pretty ridiculous. I thought that was interesting. And I want to give a shout out to the folks at UFC Fight Pass and Kazushi Sakuraba and all them. How about Quintet on Friday night? Did you watch that at all?
No, I didn't get
I know it's a lot of good fight fans missed it because, there's a lot of things going on, of course. But holy crap, Gordon Ryan came out there, smoked Josh Barnett, which I didn't see coming. Sweeps him like authoritatively with butterfly guard, passes to mount, and then mounts a triangle, and then taps him like that. I mean, like it was nothing.
How about Nicky Ryan at 17 subbing?
Ridiculous. Ridiculous. And the format was interesting because they were calling stalls, and some of that needs some work. But like you've been wondering, what's the right format for sport jiu-jitsu? Can it really work as a spectator sport? And I still think there's some tweaks, but I've never seen an event get as close in my mind. Ben and Morris was pretty close in its early stages, but iterations since then I think have all been just kind of, man, I thought Quintet was a home run. Wow, that was amazing.
Even the production was amazing with the Pride song and bringing out the teams. They did it. They packaged it pretty nice.
I know you're right. You're right. Favorite those hilarious, like Gordon Ryan versus all y'all bitches. Like
he's like picking
He's been
the
with
best
Snoop
Pokemon.
too much.
Yeah, it was just the easiest call ever. It's like, all right, I'll take Superman versus all y'all.
No, but it's interesting that you bring this up, and Matt Serra and I were talking about this yesterday, that there was criticism about guys that were great wrestlers being boring in the past, and now we are really praising Khabib. And I think it's because the fans have become so much more educated on wrestling and the ground game. And you can feel the difference and hear the difference in the arena when they go to the ground now. When someone passes or when someone escapes a submission, you can tell that the fans are more educated about it because they're watching more intently instead of saying, stand him up, stand him up. And there's a whole big difference. So I think for sports jiu-jitsu, it's the perfect time because you have a whole more group of educated fans now. And I actually give some credit to the video game, the EA game, because you actually have to learn how to get out of submissions and stuff as you're playing the game. So I think it's a good time.
I'd also say someone like Gordon Ryan being young and, he's brash too. Is really, it's amazing that these jiu-jitsu guys are like the new shit talkers, like Dylan Dennis. Like, who saw that coming? It's kind of crazy, but here we are. All right, so that is our basic show. We could have done any of those topics for forever, but let's do this. Let's do After the Beat now. We've been taking your questions, your comments, your gripes, and your small remarks using the hashtag the MMA Beat. We're going to get to those now, so don't change anything if you're watching. Just keep it here. It'll be time for our Q&A period right now. And we're back. Luke Thomas, Danny Segura, Phoenix Carnivale, and Chuck Minden Hall.
Yeah.
That's how you say it.
Yes.
So I am told. Time for After the Beat. This is where we take your questions. You have submitted them using the hashtag the MMA Beat. We have selected some of them for review. I wish we could do more, but such is life. So without further ado, let us get the first one. I didn't put that one first, but okay. How much did Luke miss Face the Pain on Saturday? Now, forget about this being about me. How much did y'all love the John Malkovich thing?
Oh, man.
Yes.
Is that not like...
It was amazing.
It's like, this is the thing, people are like, you're going to keep talking about Face the Pain until it dies. Until I can take Face the Pain by the hair and drown it in the bathtub and watch it die, I will keep talking about what a scourge on my life that it is. Yes, I will. And this is the point. Look, can you do John Malkovich, Danny, for every pay-per-view? Of course you cannot. But this idea... You can do
something.
You can do something. This idea is like, I don't even know what we could do. These people who have no imagination, I think it was a lesson that if A, you can do something, and B, anything is probably better.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
For sure. And that promo, it gets you excited. It gets you ready to, watch the fights. Yeah.
It built up.
And everybody tweeting about it, talking about it. It's definitely something, man. And you've pinpointed this issue perfectly. It's not only that the music's shit, it sounds horrible, but also it speaks to an audience. Look, if I show somebody that's younger than me, an 18-year-old, Face the Pain, they're like, yo, what is this? Take this off. Put some Kendrick, put some Travis. Yeah. Put something that's popping. Something that's new. You want to bring in new fans? Change the music, man. That's so huge. It's such a have you ever been at a party and it's just some like crazy
I don't
music.
go to parties. I'm old now.
That's true. Well, I guess I'll talk to Chuck.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
He's older than me.
I go to parties all the time.
Party all the time. Well, as well, Phoenix.
I'm partying.
I mean, it's everything. The music's so important. It sets the vibe. Just watching that promo, man, it got me so hyped for a card that I was already watching.
The music tells you also who's there.
Yeah.
You know, who's here.
Yeah,
you can gauge by the music.
They did classical and then like an upbeat. They kind of spliced it in. It was well done.
But to the point you made, did you watch the Bad Blood episode for Khabib and?
I didn't watch it all, but I watched.
So you saw it?
Yeah.
So they tell the story of Conor, and then they tell the story of Habib, and then they show all the highlights of him just smashing to Kendrick's to humble, whatever.
Dude,
I was like, woo! That was hot. I couldn't believe how good that was, man. And it's like, what? I don't understand what y'all are waiting on at this point. Like, everybody is begging you, and then there are the donks who show up on Twitter being like, I like it. Like,
they're just poking the bear, aren't they? Delete
your account and move to the bottom of the ocean, please. You are a nuisance on my life. All right. Next, please. Sorry, I get all riled up. All right, there, Phoenix. Yay or nay? Holloway versus Ortega is the best fight, at least on paper. Currently booked in MMA. True or false?
I'm biased. I'm going to say true. I love them both. I absolutely love them both. I think anything that Holloway and Ortega do is exciting. On paper, it's also exciting because you could change your opinion every day. Yeah, I think this is one of the most exciting fights with two guys that don't have to talk crap at all. They don't. And they're super nice. They're both super nice. I mean, like, Ortega admittedly says he's got a little thug in him. If you mess with me, like, I'm going to talk back, whatever. And Max is the same way, too. But generally, it's just an exciting fight for them. And also, the nerve-wracking thing is because of Max's health, we're all a little like, are we sure this is happening? Are we good? Are we cool?
That's the big thing for me.
But if you just take that aside for a second and you look at that division as a whole and you look at the fact that these two guys belong there, right? Yeah, absolutely. I'm 100% into
What about you guys? You agree that's the best fight booked on paper?
I had to think about it. What else is booked?
Yeah,
Jon Jones.
That's what I'm trying to think.
Well, Jon Jones, I agree, because that fight is just a rematch of an epic fight. But I wouldn't say that I'm looking forward to that one more than this one.
Let me interject, if I may, just to answer the question. So you've got Cyborg with Amanda Nunes.
And again, same thing.
Jon Jones fight, Daniel Cormier fight, Ortega fight. You do not have the 135 or 125 pound.
So Ortega Holloway is the closest thing I can think of to the Nurmagomedov Ferguson kind of fight,
right?
Because they're two moments, like where they are, deserve to be there. Momentum's going at each other. I love that kind of setup, and that's what was so disappointing about not getting the Fergie Nurmi fights the first time. So of course that builds us up.
Fergie Nurmi.
I think that fight honestly would be the
Fergie Nurmi.
It sounds like
UFC
Muppets.
239. You guys had some bonding.
Yeah, we were hanging, but no, but I think that honestly, I think that probably is the one that would excite me the most. I think as it comes up, as long as everything goes according to plan. I wanted to see it really bad, so I just hope it happens.
Yeah,
Danny,
that's a tough one. I think promotion-wise, I think Gus and Jones, he said it, like, I respect Jones' in-cage performances and his skills, but as a person, I don't like him. I don't respect him. That's what Gus has said in the past. So I think build-up-wise, I think that'll be fun. I think with Ortega and Holloway, like, they're going to be nice to each other. I mean, those are two guys that if you poke them, they'll fire back, but they're not going to take the first shot. But as far as just skill-wise, dude, that fight, I mean, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? Because a few people have already pieced up, Ortega on the feet, but then eventually get caught in a submission.
Feels better and better, though.
So you wonder if Max Holloway can do that, but there's a lot of intrigue there. Plus, we've already seen Gus Jones, so
I would say that there's a certain degree of obviously
novelty and
newness to Ortega and Holloway. I'm still going to go Jones Gus for me.
Yeah,
I just think Jones coming back.
Yeah, that's a big thing.
Yeah,
it is. It's for me. It's just I don't have a good argument for it. I can only just speak to myself, but that to me seems like
the other one's more like, I mean, it's epic in its own way, but it's kind of fight nerdy too. Like you want to see it for reasons that aren't going to belong to casual people.
There's no buzz.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Also, I do feel like there's like a little bit of a black cloud surrounding this matchup, just the way like Holloway withdrew from that fight, and after a while, saying he's just starting to feel better.
Every fight these days, every fight has a dark cloud on it.
Oh, we're forgetting the other fight would be Shevchenko and
yes, I was going to play that too.
That's gonna be fun as well.
I don't know. That to me has got that one to me has got a real Mousasi Rory vibe.
Yeah,
everyone is like, oh, it's real competitive.
But the size you're talking about?
They've already, I mean, it's not Muay Thai, it's not in a ring, and it's many years later. And believe me, I've stopped doing predictions for a reason. But it's like, I don't know what would be different. Shevchenko should be the prohibitive favorite, and I would be shocked if she loses.
Yeah.
But I've been shocked in MMA a million times, so what does that mean?
True. I hadn't really contemplated that fight a lot, but I can see where you're coming from on that.
But by the way, if we end the year with Derek Lewis as champion, you know,
Derek Lewis versus Brock Lesnar.
Chuck will do this show without his pants.
Lauren Murphy tweeted that Derek Lewis should come out to Great Balls of Fire, and that should be his walkout.
That would be amazing.
Shout out
she really
to Lauren
tweeted
Murphy,
that?
yeah.
Oh, that was good. That's a great call.
That is good.
All right, next. Any fresh fights you'd like to see for Mighty Mouse when he comes back? Now, this is an interesting one. There's two parts to this. We'll just start straight up with the Chuck as it is.
Okay.
Doesn't have his title. It looks like Cejudo's going to fight TJ at some point. We don't really know yet. But what would you think about an appropriate return fight for him? Because that is a tough one.
Gosh. Almost nobody in the 125 division, man.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, because he's already,
everyone?
yes. And so it's like, then you go to the next thing. And honestly, man, like guys like Dominic Cruz, because they fought in D.C. back in the day. You were at that fight, right?
In D.C.?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You think about something like that, and you're like, I'd love to see a fight like that again. Yeah. I'd love to see something like that.
So anyone have any ideas for the DJ fight? A good one to come back to?
That fight would be good. I would also, Cody Garbrandt. I don't know what's his situation, but we know he weighed just as much as Demetrius Johnson on fight day. So, that makes me think that he could probably cut down to 125. And, if that's the case, that could be a pretty big fight.
Yeah. Here's the other part of this conversation I want to have, and the reason why I picked that question, which was one, I was like, man, I don't know who he would fight. And then I began to think, number one, Sergio Pettis bumped up to bantamweight. He's back. He's going to be fighting Rob Font. Tough fight, too, man.
Yeah,
that's right.
That's a very good striker.
Very good striker out of the De La Grade gym. So there's that. Then you've got Cejudo's not even going to be defending his title. He's going to jump to 135. Then on top of that, you had Demetrius Johnson, who was this flyweight allure, and he still is in many ways, but without the title, it doesn't carry the same degree of significance. And streak. And I had this debate on my radio show, which is, imagine you had to make a choice, because the argument, as I'm told, about 165, the super lightweight division, is that the UFC doesn't have enough room. And folks were like, that's not true. It is true. Here's the difference. You could put a 165 division, you could drain both 55 and 70. Or make it 75 or something. But the reason why you would still have to gain fighters is because the cheap end is what you would be using to fill it back in, the bottom tier. The issue is I talk to fighters all the time, and they tell me I cannot get enough fights. I can fight 2 times a year. It's not enough. I hear it routinely. And because there's not enough space on these cards. Now, we can debate that or not. I think it's true, but forget all that. Imagine you had to make a choice. 125 or 165. You can only have one. What would you pick? Danny?
Man, this is a hard question because
it is a very easy question.
Promotion-wise, 165.
No, you get to make it. Let's say the UFC was killing it with business and it wasn't about that necessarily. You knew you would make money with 165, but you didn't need it.
I didn't need money.
You didn't necessarily need it. No, be nice to have.
I don't need to sell pay-per-views, right?
You always need to sell pay-per-views,
obviously, but it's not like I need to meet a certain.
Right. It's not.
Just answer the question.
I would honestly, I would keep 125 because I do feel like in a way, fighters do have a home at 170 and have had a home for years. Same thing at 155, and mixing that up, would it be interesting? Would it be fun? But at the same time, if that means taking a weight class away from, and let's keep in mind, like 10 pounds from 125 to 135, it's a huge difference when you're at that lower weight. All those guys that are elite, like Demetrius Johnson, I don't think he'd be as successful as he is today if it wasn't for that 125-pound division.
Of course not.
And we really saw one of the greatest fighters of all time step in that cage when he was fighting.
Okay.
And I think it'd be a shame to not give someone like Demetrius Johnson or many other fighters, even like Henry Cejudo, that option. And then just have them force, fight at a weight class that, it's just not natural for them. So
I don't know if I could choose. I don't think that's fair to choose.
You have to choose.
That's an exercise.
I know.
You actually don't have that power.
Okay, so like here's what I'm saying is that I love 155 and 170 because it's the speed and the athleticism of the smaller guys and the power of the bigger guys. It's the perfect middle ground. Yeah. So I love that, and I love the opportunity to keep people as healthy as possible. So if there was an option for the 165, I'm like 100% with it. Plus, Duke Rufus was telling me yesterday, he's like, that's an opportunity to build another star. And we keep talking about how we need more stars. And when you're a star, it's usually when you're also the champion. Not always the case, but that's a possibility. So, but I also, I've always been impressed with the 125 guys. I've always been a big DJ fan. I can't give you an answer. I'm sorry. Skip.
Typical fence rider.
Unbelievable.
What do you think, Chuck?
I can't answer. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, to me, it would be simple. I would get rid of 125 pounds.
That is the correct answer.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
But I mean, there's a lot of reasons for it. But
Because it's not a big seller? Is that...
that's a big part of it. I just think that, I don't know, there's a lot of reasons for it. But a part of it is,
Honestly,
it's
that
not
would
as...
really be the only part
It's
of it,
like
right?
there's
Oh, I
just not...
disagree.
There's not as many compelling matchups, basically, and there's not as many, like, even on this last one that we just went, with the crowds booing through one fight, you know what I mean, in Vegas, and that's the Pettis fight.
Right.
So it's, I don't know what it is. It's lost steam. I don't know if it's, you know, at this point, DJ ran it for so long. You get Cejudo. I'm not sure where the appeal is right now for the division. And I know you could make 165 and it would flourish.
And like the average human being hangs out in that division anyway. Like there's much more people at that weight than there are at the 125 weight as far as men.
100%. So, and I think that, you know, a good many of the 125s, not all of them, could assimilate back to the bantamweight.
So you have Cejudo as the champion. He's going to be fighting at bantamweight next, at least, right? Johnson, we'll see. Pettis already bumped up. So that leaves you Jussier Formiga, Joseph Benavidez, who I would say is closer to the end of his career than the beginning, Ray Borg, Devison Figueiredo, John Moraga, Wilson Hayes, Destin Ortiz, Alexandre Pantoja. Right. You're going to keep that over 165? I find that insane.
I just feel bad.
Here's the thing.
I feel bad saying that, and then all my 125 friends.
It's not that they're not good.
Hate mail.
It's not that they're not good fighters. They're all world-class, superb talents.
Right.
To your point, historic greatness.
Yeah.
In the case of Demetrius Johnson, and you would lose that. But let's just be real about it. What division would you pick behind flyweight? If you had to make a choice between flyweight and bantamweight, or flyweight and feather, flyweight and light, flyweight and welter, flyweight and middle, you'd pick all of them ahead of flyweight. That's just the reality of it. People have this weird thing where they're like, "Oh my God, Demetrius Johnson's so little, I'd beat him up." Yo, Demetrius Johnson would wreck your shit.
Yeah.
Please, but that's not the point. The point is that there's this dumbass perception that exists, and it continues. You can make way more stars out of 165 than you ever will out of 125, and you're going to get some ridiculously good talent there. You're not manufacturing something. So, like, I agree with you. If you've got a good fight palette, 125 is the bee's knees. But a lot of people don't, and this is a business to run. 165 is the right answer.
Right.
All right, there you go. Glad we had that debate.
Sorry, 125ers.
125 for luck.
All right, what about there? What about you, Chuck? You love these questions. What is your favorite dipping sauce? Now, that's a loaded question because we don't know what we're dipping.
Dipping sauce.
But do you have like some things you gravitate to?
I mean, nacho cheese. I don't know. I'm trying to think like in terms of...
Nacho cheese is a good one.
Nacho cheese is good. Would hummus be like a dipping sauce?
Is
that more of a spread?
No, if that...
Okay, for the purposes, it's not a sauce, so you can't call it that.
Yeah.
No, so you can't count hummus.
But you dip.
You do dip it.
So,
yeah. What do you think? So you're a nacho cheese guy, right?
Yeah, probably that.
All right, what do you think, Phoenix? What things you like to dip?
I'm half Puerto Rican and half Italian, so olive oil is pretty much on everything.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Probably
too.
marinara, I guess.
Marinara's a good one for the carbs out there, right? Yeah, that's a good one. All right, olive oil, marinara, and then nacho cheese.
I'll go with salsa rosada, the pink sauce.
Good, very good answer.
That's all my Latin
Very
American.
good.
Yes. Is this the Colombian monstrosity that is ketchup and mayo put together? Oh my
It's
God.
amazing. It's delicious.
Colombian food is it's amazing. It's amazing, except for what he's talking about, which is garbage.
Go try it. Mix a little bit of ketchup, mayo.
This
fries.
is, by the way,
Thank me later.
Tell me, tell them I'm telling the truth. It's also y'all's ceviche.
It could be.
I've had it. Cartagena was ceviche.
It could be.
Trifling.
You can add it. It's delicious, but I mean, there's
trifling food.
You can try other ceviche as well.
It's like they make so many good things. They put
honestly, I
lime
feel
on
like
everything.
salsa rosada is more for like I wouldn't have ceviche with it. I wouldn't have seafood.
What would you have
like,
with it?
It's more like fries and more junk food.
Okay. See, I've never had it that way. I've only had it in Cartagena where they put it on fish.
Nah.
And I was like, what the
You gotta have some fries.
Ketchup and fish.
Yeah, they put ketchup, mustard. Sorry, what am I saying? They put ketchup, mayo, and then lime juice, and so the acid of all of that cooks the fish, and then you eat it, and they love it. And I'm like, I've had better ceviche than this. Anyway, that's the only Colombian food I don't like. It's the only one. And
You're not living life, man.
I know.
Wasn't expecting this
You're
today.
messing up.
All right, so we had nacho cheese, we had marinara, olive oil, we had trifling garbage juice with this man, and I I know. It's me. I don't like it. All right. I would say, how do you not have blue cheese on a list of dipping sauce essentials, right? No?
Next question.
What the fuck? Wait. When you order wings, what do you put on them?
Just eat the wing. I mean,
I don't like wings. I don't like messy food.
yeah. That's more of a man.
And you're Puerto Rican and Italian. You don't like messy food?
I don't like messy food.
You all are worthless.
This blue cheese.
What?
Yeah, blue cheese, man.
I wish Joey Diaz were here. He'd have something to say about this. You guys don't like blue cheese, really?
Joey Diaz.
All right, what about barbecue sauce? Like as a dipping sauce?
I don't like barbecue.
See, I don't like slathering barbecue. I like it to
Yeah, no,
dip.
I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
And then, ketchup and mustard, right? Something like that?
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say ketchup and mayo.
No, I'm not trifling. I'm teasing. I'm just teasing. All right, there you go. Favorite dipping sauce. And it turns out that Phoenix is a communist. I had no idea. All right, what's next? Chuck, you can have this one. Jon Jones narrowly beat Gustafsson for the first time around. Do you think, having learned more about each other from the first fight, the rematch will be close again? I kind of went over this a little bit. Or do you think either will have more decisive victory? Let me add a little nugget to this we didn't go over. Remember the last time they had a rematch, Jon looked way better.
Yeah.
What do you make of that now?
Yeah, I think there's part of that. I also think, if I look back on it, I believe him when he says this, he probably looked past that fight a little bit. I think his head was filled with other stuff. He was partying a little bit back then. He had the sponsors. All the questions back then were about like his sponsors and everything. I think that he just wasn't treating the fight as probably seriously, as serious as he probably should have been. Now that doesn't mean that they won't have a competitive fight, but I do think that he'll be taking this one a lot more seriously the second time through. So I'd be really surprised, honestly, if Gustafsson came out and looked like the guy, if he had the offensive moments he did early, like in the last fight, I'd be a little bit surprised by that.
Yeah, we kind of went over it. I should have picked that one. All right. Well, do you guys want to add anything?
I think that they're both fighters that evolve. We know that Gus really got better with his wrestling and worked on his wrestling and incorporated that into his game a lot too. We know that Jon has, gotten on the mats and created some really good jiu-jitsu and got really into it and enjoyed it, even trained in his gi and, and his striking is always evolving as well. He's a student of the game. So I think we would see two athletes with a whole new bag of tricks.
All right.
I think it should be close, but I don't expect the same level of competitiveness of the first one. Given a lot of wear and tear for Gus and Jon Jones, I feel like coming back he's gonna have a fire under him.
Yeah.
All right. Fair enough. Next. All right, Mr. Segura. That's the same one.
All right, now you.
There we go, Mr. Segura. GSP versus Woodley to retire 170-pound division. Winner takes welterweight GOAT status. So this came to me, if I can set this up. Your question to answer. Michael Chiesa tweeted me. And he suggested, here's what they should do if they make a 165 division. Have Woodley fight St. Pierre at 170, and then when you create 165, after the Woodley-St. Pierre fight, then you have 175, kind of like a retirement of that 170. Do you like that idea? Would that even be for GOAT status? That's a big question.
Yeah, I love that idea. In fact, the UFC should hire Michael Chiesa to build the promotions for their fights. That's a fantastic idea because GSP's still around. We saw him do whatever he did to Michael Bisping. We saw him being still very competitive. And yeah, it would basically, like, if you're going to close a division, which would be 170, right? Put an end to it and take out a new division from it. Make it significant. Make a story out of it. Don't just make a fight, right? GSP, the welterweight king against the new welterweight king, which is Tyron Woodley, who's been killing it. That would be a really good fight to have for the last 170-pound title. I mean, that would be perfect.
I mean, I'm all for the idea of ending it that way. If that's what they're going to do, I'd love that, because GSP, that was his division. He should be there for that fight, you know what I mean? And you got the guy who's current. He's the one who's there. So that idea I love. Now, but I just don't think it would be for GOAT status unless GSP wins. But then again, I'm like, if he beats GSP, I think that would go a long way toward Warren Woodley, but he'd still have a ways to go, I think.
What I would argue, if GSP beats Woodley, he becomes the GOAT. No questions about that. If Woodley beats GSP, then we would have to see what he does at 175.
Yeah. Yep.
And if he does kill it there and maintains the title there, then I think
GSP didn't lose for a decade. You know what I mean? And the way he beat people. I mean, it's just right now he's on a different level. That's all. There was a hot potato up until Woodley finally kind of stabilized the division. He hasn't had it all that long. He's looked really good in that Till fight. The way he dominated it, I think he's certainly getting closer to entering a conversation, but he's not there yet, as far as I'm concerned.
I think he just has to be more active, stay more busy, be out there a little bit more. But I think, you know, Tyron has not gotten the credit that he deserves because of the matchups that he's had. And after the Till fight, we can talk a little bit more about his stats. I mean, he's really a very capable guy. And I like the GSP matchup because these are two guys that are not only great athletes, but have very high fight IQs. Very high fight IQs.
Agreed.
They do.
So how they would even
approach
face
the fight,
and approach each
some
other
people are
and all of
like,
that.
we don't have a game plan. Just work on, you work on yourself getting better. These guys would focus every time. I remember the BJ Penn fight. I'll never forget that when he fought at UFC 94, and he wanted to keep BJ's arms up because he wanted to drain his shoulders. You remember this whole thing? He was like, he had very specific things he was doing, and that's GSP, obviously. But I feel like Woodley is a chip off that block. Like he literally is a student of the game.
Very
he's going to find something about what you're going to bring and exploit it, you know, and impose his will. So to me, they're very similar in that sense.
I agree with all that. Good analysis, gang. All right, what's next? Here we go. This is an interesting one. What do you make of the audio, Phoenix, of Conor telling Khabib it's just business when the third round ended?
I can't say it any better than Matt Serra said it today on UFC
what did he say?
Because it was like a mic dropping moment. He goes, "Oh, now you want to tell me that it was just business? Now when we're fighting?
Yeah.
What? Because I want to calm you down while you're beating me?" So that was what Matt was saying. For me, it was just really almost similar to what Matt's saying. It's so weird to say it then. Why say it then? Did you think that you weren't going to have an opportunity to say it after the fight? Why did you feel the need to apologize to him then? I don't understand the timing of that.
Well,
you know what I mean?
I understand it completely because Khabib is a beast, and you got this guy mouthing you for 15
He's like, "Hey, I was
minutes.
kidding."
I'd be like,
In fairness, I gave McGregor that third round. Did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
10-9.
So he did say it after a round where he had done a little bit better.
Yeah,
But we know McGregor's a very smart fighter. And look, a lot of people are saying this, like, oh, he wanted a way out. I think Khabib was so intense for him. It was way more than a fight. In a way, he kind of wanted to calm him down a bit, right?
Maybe.
I mean, Eddie Alvarez talked about it, you know, in the lead up to this fight. Like, Conor McGregor makes you feel calm. It makes you feel like you're secure. And then, bam, here comes the punch. In a way, I feel like he was trying to, you know, cool him down a little bit. Because, man, an angry Khabib, we saw, that's not
It's too little too late, though, huh? What do you think, Chuck?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I just think that he was like, hey, man, you've been killing me. Yes. That's what it seems like to me. I mean, maybe he knew that the end of that fight was near. You know what I mean? But
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
There's a Key and Peele skit. Have you guys ever seen it?
Which one?
It's so friggin' good. It's an old Key and Peele skit where it's about MMA. And one guy's like, yeah, you know, I'm just going to fight him and see what happens. The other goes, I will take his life from his breath. And he's like, no, we just fight you, man. Like, this is a joke. You have to look it up. It's like, great, I'll send it to you.
I do like
I love it. Yeah, same here.
But the whole idea is that, you know, some people really think that they could just say whatever they want. And it's like part of the game. And other people are like, no, this is dead serious.
My read on this is, I don't think it's fair to call Conor McGregor a front runner in the sense that we have seen him come back, right? So you've seen him tired and come back, but you've also seen him get tired and just stay tired and get finished. Now, some of those were when he was not taking it seriously at 170 with Nate Diaz in the first time. The Mayweather one, I don't really know what to make of the Mayweather one because he was going to lose that no matter what, probably.
Yeah.
But I do think there's something to be said for the fact, and I made this point before, like everyone wants to clown Paulie. Paulie takes it to like I mean, way too far. Oh, he's got no balls. Well, okay, Paulie. That seems a little extreme, bud. What I will say is this, man. For whatever else you want to describe it, dude, when he gets tired, he's a different fighter. People are like, I didn't see him gas. You're right. You didn't see him gas in the sense where he was stumbling around like it was in the first Diaz, or even the second Diaz fight. Yeah. For one reason, it didn't go as long, and two, he was constantly on the defensive. But I think he was drained. He needs zip and pop, and when he has it, oh my God, he will light you on fire. But when that gets compromised, you know, I've said this before, Frankie Edgar gets tired, he goes from here to here. Conor gets tired, he goes from here to here. It's a major drop-off. And I just think he was getting tired. And dude, you know this. When you lock up with somebody and they're more intense than you physically, the rule is you're supposed to match their intensity. Yeah. And you know after a while if you can match that intensity or not. not. And your mind begins to tell you you cannot match this person's intensity.
Right.
I have felt that, and I've been there.
Especially
and
when Khabib was head fighting and digging his head in.
Yeah, like Conor
When you're
won
losing
the
head
round.
fights,
Yeah.
you know, and you're getting controlled and you're peeling a wrist lock and then back again, man, you just know. You know.
Conor won that round, but he was dealing with the 2-on-1 with Khabib, and Khabib was just constantly going after him a little bit. And I think he was. I think he felt that intensity and was
a
like,
battle of will.
ugh, you know.
Well, his team was criticizing themselves, saying they were just like too much on the defense.
Right.
You know, and also Duke said something, and I don't know how true this is, but he thought that Conor was hurt going into that fight, that there was a possible rib injury as well. And I look at it, and I don't think Conor is as fast as he normally is. I did think that there was a decrease in his speed, but it could have been the tentativeness. As I have to watch everything that this dude is doing.
Yeah.
I thought he defended a lot better than I expected him to, actually, in the first round as well. So it's here we are talking about this fight again, but all of these variables are very interesting.
Yeah, could be mind games, could have been fatigue, could have been just feeling a guy's intensity. I just, when a guy like that is in your face, shit, bro. You can feel every inch of that. So, all right. That is it for us. We appreciate you guys tuning in. I believe we will return next week. The overlords here at Vox Media have been cracking the whip. We want more content, and I said, what can I do, folks? I got to be on the road. But we're back now. We're not going to be on the road for a while. In fact, next big UFC event's going to be in our hometown, so that should be kind of fun. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Always, don't forget to use the hashtag the MMA Beat. That's it for us. For Chuck, for Phoenix, for Danny, I'm Luke. Hands up, chin down, let 'em fly. This is the MMA Beat.